Good day, Baylor Law friends and other friends. We're here today to celebrate the fantastic teaching and professional career of Professor Ron Beal, my dear friend. And it is my privilege to host this interview on behalf of the law school. I've known Ron for a long time. I knew him before I went to law school. We went to church together and were friends. I was his student here at Baylor Law School, and I loved his classes. I took every one that I could. I did an independent study with him, and even though I already knew him when I was a law student, he became more than my friend. He became a mentor and a model for me, the kind of person I wanted to be, and someone that I greatly admired. Before we start our Q&A together, I want to make a couple of important comments about our friend Ron Beal. First, he is a treasure and will be greatly missed at the law school. I know as his colleague and as his dear friend, one who has officed across the hall from him for decades, I already miss him. And as I look across the office and see someone else starting to move in there, I can't imagine that I won't be seeing him from day to day, but certainly our friendship doesn't end at all. Secondly, Professor Beal, as most every Texas lawyer knows, is the preeminent authority on Texas administrative law, without equal. No one can touch him. Finally, Professor Beal is a wonderful person, colleague, friend, teacher, mentor, writer, speaker, devoted servant of our profession, including to the State Bar of Texas in many respects, through CLE programs consistently and otherwise. And as I've mentioned, just a dear friend. My guess is there are many, countless former students that continue to consider Professor Beal their mentor. As a final comment, having officed across the hall from Professor Beal for decades, I have witnessed his consistent availability, kindness, pure kindness, and helpfulness to students. And that, above everything, will be his primary legacy at the law school. And I thank you for the privilege, Ron, of talking with you today and asking you to reflect on a couple of things.
Well, I don't think I should say anything. I'll just say, that's me.
Well, I've said,
and you all. Anything I say will detract from that.
I've saved the bad stuff till the end. No, just kidding.
Okay.
Just kidding.
You're very kind. Thank you very much, Walt.
You've been very kind to me and helpful, and I appreciate everything. First question. How did you first become interested in being a teacher?
Well, it's kind of one thing that I have been embarrassed about almost my whole life, and I'll tell you why. I was in college and I really liked college, but nothing really bit me like I want to be a doctor or I want to do this or I want to be an engineer or whatever. And I had always loved my teachers, particularly my grade school teachers. So way back then, there wasn't really a teaching program that you went through in college. You basically got a degree and someone hired you. I went, and we barely had a career development office. I mean, it was like there was nothing called a CDO back then, but we did have a couple people in an office that could give us a little idea of what to do if we wanted to do a certain thing. And I went in there and asked them about grade school teaching. And they told me a lot of things about it and how to do it. And when they told me the salary, I said, could I even buy a used car on that salary and pay my rent? I was shocked. It was so unbelievably low, which is horrible. And it's still too low today, even though it's better. And to be, as a young guy, it just kind of turned me off that I would be paid really what I considered, I guess I would have said then, peanuts. So I decided I'm not going to do that right away, or at least I'm going to look at different options. And so I applied with a lot of companies and I liked none of it. This is the probably you'll like the best. My father, who is a lawyer, as I say, laughed all the way to his urn when he heard that I was going to go to law school. Because I had learned by growing up in a legal family that lawyers had power. They did a lot of good things. And back then, they did not become really wealthy, but they got paid for what they were worth. And I thought, and I knew how helpful it could be. My dad had told me my whole life, the way lawyers think in that, doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or not, it can help you out. So I decided, what the heck, I'll go to law school. And I went to law school and went through law school. And once again, I wasn't really motivated by any particular type of law. I ended up becoming a trial lawyer because it sounded fun. And I was single because it was one of those firms that they kind of worked 6 or 7 days a week. And I did work 6 or 7 days a week. And back then, things happened more quickly. After 3 years, I was offered a partnership. And I knew if I could become a partner by seeing my fellow partners, I would be pretty wealthy and I would work a whole lot. And if I got into it, I would probably kind of be stuck for the rest of my life. And guess what came back? Don't you want to be a teacher? And believe it or not, I was thumbing through the American Bar Journal in the back where they were listing jobs, and Temple Law School in Philadelphia had a 2-year master's degree, LLM, unique. It was to teach smart people to be great teachers. And for 2 years, I taught a full load as any other professor. And guess what? There were professors, tenured professors in my classes that would critique me. And I loved it and just thought it was the best thing in the world. And because I'm taking way too long on this question, to zip it along, I looked at a lot of law schools. Baylor really enticed me, all because of our program, which everybody knows about. It's like that too many schools are not looking at practice at all, and we did. And I thought, I'll come for 2 or 3 years. And my wife said that too. We'll go for 2 or 3 years. And so 38 years later, here we are, and we've had a blast.
Well, that's great. That is great.
So that's how I got here.
Well, you made me want to be a teacher. You made me want to be a teacher, had a strong influence on me.
I don't think you've ever told me that, Walt. That's great.
It is true. It is true for sure. I was going to ask you, and I will go ahead and ask you a bit more about your road to Baylor Law School. You've kind of told us that, but can you tell us a little bit more about, were there some other schools that were on your short list of places to look initially?
There were. I've been thinking this as I have retired, and how I have so thoroughly loved my career is that in one sense, I should never have been a professor, because when I decided to go to law school, my parents had sent me to a very expensive, small, private college which I thoroughly enjoyed. And my dad was a small town practitioner, and he did absolutely fine financially, but he was not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. And bless my mom was a full-time mom, and I knew they couldn't afford to pay also to support me totally while I went to law school. So I went to an all-night law school in Minneapolis. It was called William Mitchell College of Law. It's now called Mitchell Hamlin. And I worked full-time and went to law school at night. Classes started at 6 and went to 10, 5 days a week. And even though they called it part-time, the minimum load we could have was 10 credit hours, which is the minimum for any law school. And to make a long story short, most people think if you go to a night law school, you're probably not very smart and you didn't learn much. And that was not true at all. And therefore, I mean, to be honest with you, when I started looking for jobs, even with my LLM from Temple, a lot of schools were not interested just from the fact that I went to an evening law school, a quote, part-time law school. So Baylor was the closest to, Angus McSwain, our beloved dean, said, well, I like people like that. If you can work full time and go to law school and end up at the top of your class, that's good. So I didn't have a lot of choices.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What about Baylor's program at the time appealed to you?
And it was kind of what I mentioned earlier, which we all know, we all talk about it ad infinitum, and the dean does too, is that so many law schools only focus on learning the law and don't learn anything about applying the law, of what it really is like to apply it, and that there are skills that need to be learned. And that's the kind of law school that I wanted to be at. Because all the 38 years I have been here, we kind of started smiling. Now it's probably 15 years ago. I think it's 10, when the McCrate report came out and said, law school should be teaching skills. And that shocked 95% of the law schools. And we all started smiling in faculty meetings of, well, everybody's finally getting to us. They're finally doing what we have been doing. And that's what enticed me. And, I first came, I was working in the practice court program because I had tried a lot of cases. Back then, dockets were very short. So often we were fighting with the judge to let us finish discovery because there was a trial date open and they wanted to fill it. It wasn't the other way of pleading to get a trial date in the next 3 years. It was quickly. So that enticed me to help, teach young men and women to learn how to try cases, because to me, and that's what I've always believed all these years, is that practice court is so valuable for everyone, even though probably the overwhelming majority will never try a case in their life. Because if you know what goes on, you're going to write a better contract. You're just going to write, if you're a contract lawyer and you know how it can be torn apart in the court of law, you're going to write that contract much better than if you had no idea what was going on. And that kind of goes on and on. So that's what really enticed me to come here. And what has been so wonderful, I give great credit to Dean Tobin for first raising the money and then being willing to, when I came, practice court was about it for skills. And as you know, today, we're covering the whole gambit. I mean, we're focusing so much on the transactional side, particularly on the writing side, all over the place, that we have been able to expand so much over the last basically 40 years. It's truly amazing.
What do you like most, or did you like most about teaching? Or more, it doesn't have to be just one thing. What are the few things that you really loved about teaching?
Well, talking about keeping a theme going is that the thing that there are many things I love about teaching, but what I have loved the most is the teaching of a particular skill. In my LAP course, Legislation, Administrative Power, and Procedure, and many of the people watching this will say, what's LAP? Because it was called public law when they were here. We even called it environmental legislation for a while. And we had one other name of some kind. I can't remember. No, we didn't. No, that was it. And then we came up with LAP. Teaching statutory construction. As you know, as every lawyer knows, so much of the law today is statutory, not common law. And the fundamental difference between the common law and a statute is you can ask a judge, you can argue to a judge to change the common law. You probably won't win at the trial court level, but you might up on appeal. But with a statute, the law was made by the legislature and the statute governs, period. And believe it or not, there are so many lawyers that don't understand that and don't understand that the words in the law is the law. And so much of those words many times are ambiguous. And I got out of law school. I'll jab my own law school. I didn't know what the canons of statutory construction were. I learned them very quickly at my job because you can imagine the first couple of years at a trial firm, who's researching and writing all the briefs. That's the youngin'. I learned about statutory construction very quickly, but I sure wish I would have been taught in law school. And it is so much fun to watch the students at first think this is easy as pie, then find out how horrible they did, and then develop into good statutory construction lawyers. And it's so much fun because it's like, I tell them, it's like riding a bike, that some of it can be said, some of it can be told, but then when you get on the bike, guess what you're going to do the first time? If somebody gave you a lecture on riding a bike, you're going to fall down. You're just going to fall down and that's it. So you just have to get back up and get on again. And what are you developing? You, with your body, you're developing a skill. And that's the same thing with statutory construction. So I love it when I give them these simple statutes and they read them and they say, this is so simple. And then I start giving them fact scenarios that raise these ambiguities. And we can't run back to the legislature and ask them. That just doesn't happen. The courts were smart very long ago. We don't cross-examine 435 people in Congress or something to figure out what they meant. So we try to figure it out. And it is a skill. Many of those canons overlap each other, contradict each other. It's just something you just have to get in there. Or as I've gone with the students, and they hate me when I say it at the beginning, when I give them their first set, I said, guess what you guys are? You're a baby of about, a year to a year and a half, and I'm going to throw you in the water and see if you can swim. And I said, and guess what? You're probably going to sink, but I'm going to be there to catch you. And you'll figure it out. And that's the great fun because, we go through all these and then we do them all in class. And it is, I am still amazed. My last lab class that I just finished, a statute that I had been using, one of my play statutes I've been using for years, somebody came up with a new argument I had never seen. Wow. I just like, how did you figure that out? Yeah, that can be argued to be. So that to me is the fun part. We have to not be afraid to be wrong. In a law firm, someone else is going to read your brief and say, that's wrong. You can't do that. Or that's just, don't you realize how unreasonable that is? Or whatever. And so we do the same thing in class. And that's what, I get 6 weeks out of the 9 weeks. I have to get them ready with the first 3 weeks, but then 6 weeks, And I did that for 35 years, and that was just a miracle. And then the other thing is probably you'd say, well, sure, this is it. It's just so much fun to take intelligent people who are wholly ignorant of something and help guide them through. So, and I'm not talking skill now, I'm just talking knowledge. And by the end of the quarter, they're speaking the speak. They understand the overall theory behind it, so that when they run into something, they're not afraid of it. They kind of go, oh, well, we can work this out as to how is this consistent. And as you probably know, hardly anybody comes to law school saying they want to be an administrative lawyer. And most of them do not know about formal adjudications at the federal level or contested cases and talking about PFDs, proposal for decisions, and the substantial evidence test and all these things. Most people are just totally clueless the first day of class. And it's just such fun. And that's what helps, yes, I'll say this, the drudgery of grading. One of the things that helps the drudgery of grading is that every few papers I pinch myself and say, do you see what they know? You know, I mean, look at, that's coming out of their head now. You know, they didn't type it up ahead of time and research it. It's in their head and they're dealing with it. They don't always get everything right, but that's how you do a test. That some things are more difficult to see than others, but you just kind of say, wow, they actually are they could get out there and they don't know everything, but they sure know enough to get going, and that's all you need.
Right, right. I did notice, by the way, when I asked you what would you like most about teaching, that you didn't start with, I just love to grade exams.
I am sure every job must have it. But when I finished just recently, my last set, I had a 95 lap exams from the entering fall class, or was it 90? I don't know, something like that. When those were done, it was pretty amazing to think, I don't do that again.
I'm sure it was.
And I know every job has some task like that. I always told my son, and he's come back to say it, is that, no matter how wonderful a job, there's ditch digging in every job. Right. Where you just have to put the shovel in and out and just keep on going when you're tired. There's something in every job like that. So,
right. What about your passion and deep interest in administrative law? How did that come about?
Well, it's funny how things just happen in life. First, and I won't name his name, there was someone teaching federal administrative law when I came back in 1983. And even though I helped in the practice court program, I still had, quote, room in my portfolio to teach a course or two. And this person had been given, because a lot of people may or may not know, today we kind of hire people for a slot. You're going to teach property and then land use and this. When we got hired back in the early 80s, Dean McSwain, they said, you're a utility player. If I tell you to teach it, you teach it. So we all taught. I mean, I have a bunch of courses that I taught once or twice, never wanted to teach them again because I didn't really like them. But when Angus told you to do it, you did it. and that's the way it went. Well, this professor had federal administrative law and hated it. And he said, well, you take it. And I thought, well, I had taken the course in law school. With my practice, my trial practice, it was a personal injury practice. And sometimes that bled into the administrative process. Like if someone got injured on the job, we're talking about, the federal government sets standards in workplaces. And sometimes we had to deal with it. And I'd always liked procedure. And maybe that's another reason I was attracted to Baylor, is that what is one of our big themes is that procedure should never kill your client's chances to win. So what's that mean? The lawyer has to be an expert at procedure and never make procedural mistakes. And I kind of bought into that. And I thought, okay, I'll try it. And I ended up really liking it. In fact, I guess that's the course. I hadn't thought of it. That is the course that I taught for the longest time. I taught it 38 years because I never gave it up. And then as I got into it, what motivated me was two things. One other kind of funny thing was, the ultimate procedure is the rules of civil procedure. And what's enticing about that, particularly here at Baylor and at most schools, that's the first year students who are totally wet behind the ears. And that's so much fun to work with them in their very first quarter. So I really want to teach federal civil procedure or civil procedure. Well, one of our other beloved colleagues, Bill Trail, a wonderful teacher who was here for so many years, and I'm sure many of the people who took me had Professor Trail. At that time, he was hardcore into it, and we only had one person teaching it, which we still do now. And I saw that wasn't going to be freed up very soon. Well, administrative law is procedure. And I enjoyed it. And then what I didn't really understand, how many agencies there are, federal and state, and how much they impact people's lives. And I went, whoa, this is really important stuff. And it also motivated me, kind of what I said a few minutes ago. Virtually no one comes to law school saying they want to be an administrative lawyer because they don't even know what it is. But it's so important. So there was a need to have students not only appreciate it, but understand it. And that's when I jumped at that we didn't have a Texas procedure administrative course here. And particularly back then, virtually all of our students stayed in Texas. They weren't going to be able to avoid agencies, again, in almost any kind of a practice, and nobody knew anything about it. And so I posited to the faculty curriculum committee, can I add a Texas administrative law course? And so it just kind of started building there. And then the third part that kind of put it all together is another absolutely wonderful professor. I'm sure he was still here when you came, was he? Irv Elias?
Yes.
Professor Elias was the head of the curriculum committee. He was the one that presented to the curriculum committee. I don't know what put the bug in his ear, but he was the one that could not believe we did not teach statutory construction. And he said to the curriculum committee and then to the faculty as a whole, we must have a course like that. It's embarrassing that we call ourselves a skills law school and we don't teach people how to do statutory construction. And he got it passed and he walked in my door and said, I have no idea how you're going to do this, but it's yours. And when he was walking out the door, he said, and I want you to have an administrative component with it, because what is true? Most statutes are administered by a state or a federal agency. Not all, but so many of them. And many people won't take administrative law on their own for whatever reasons. So I want you to give the basics to them in what ultimately became LAP. And, I was primed to do that too. So that kind of put my package together and what motivated me. And then what you were so kind to say, I finally figured out there's no source for Texas administrative law in Texas. I mean, none. There just isn't. And that was a long process, but I ended up writing a treatise on that. because, once again, if lawyers don't understand procedure, they're going to mess up their clients' rights. And so we need to have a source out there that lawyers can go to. So if it's their first administrative law case, or even if it's their 100th, that if they have a question, they can get it answered.
Right. And it is the definitive treatise. And if I may say so, and kind of interpreting what you said to a certain extent, and knowing this, I think you were ahead of your time in realizing that students and many lawyers didn't understand that a big part of the future of law practice, Texas and elsewhere, is at the administrative level. And it fits perfectly with what we do at Baylor, because we teach advocacy skills. And it is similar to being in the courtroom, but more lawyers are going to be before administrative agencies.
Right. You're right. And, and it took me a while to get we have different PC instructors as we go along to convince them what so many people, when they say administrative hearing, well, that's some touchy-feely thing where they sit around a table and talk. And so I get them the Texas Administrative Procedure Act and say, here's a contested case. The rules of evidence apply. There's a burden of proof of preponderance. The movement has the burden of proof, and the other party has the absolute right to confront and rebut. And there's a final decision, again, based on that burden of proof. And you know what everybody says when they realize that? Well, that's a bench trial. That's the same thing as a bench trial in the regular court system, when you either waive your right to jury trial or don't have a right to jury trial. It's where the judge is the judge and then the jury by making the fact determinations. And it's just amazing. All the trial skills we teach are directly applicable. I said, you will be totally comfortable because you have to object just like the professors taught you. You have to know the rules of evidence. It's just, you have to know how to enter an exhibit. It's the same thing.
Right. And in some cases, it's more nuanced in terms of the standards of review and the complexities involved there. So in some ways, it's more challenging.
It really is.
For sure. Are there, and just a couple more questions, are there, when you look back over your career, are there some high points that stand out, or some milestones that you'll never forget?
Oh, well, I do think one of the milestones was, writing the treatise. Originally, it was 750 pages. And I must mention, I guess I'm patting myself on the back. Back then, we had the higher workload than we do now, and no time off for scholarship, because Baylor didn't do that. Now we have all this incentive and help. It doesn't make it any easier, but it makes it more of your job. I have to give credit to my wife, Claudia. For about 2.5 years, she never saw me, because if I wasn't working, I was writing the treatise. And that was a highlight, to get it in print, and then to get the courts and the lawyers to read it and actually cite it. That was fun. It was really exciting to do that. And now it's 2 volumes. It's 1,100 pages, and it's so that was a really big thing. But another thing along the way, which is always fun and sometimes very frustrating, is that particularly Dean Tobin has been totally supportive of us writing amicus briefs, and to write cutting amicus briefs, meaning when the court issues an opinion, I mean, always being respectful and polite, but telling the court, you wrote an opinion and it's wrong. And here, I don't know how many amicus I have written that my title is in anticipation of a motion for rehearing. Because since I'm an amicus, I can't file a motion for rehearing, but I can write a brief and say, one of you lawyers, you need to file a motion for rehearing because this is wrong. And why it's really euphoric and can be really a bummer is, guess what? Judges are judges and they can tell me, well, you're crazy. And then sometimes it's euphoric when they actually cite you and say, we need to issue a new opinion because we got this wrong. And helping better the law of administrative law, that's really exciting, because what do you know is that if you convince the court the right way to go, that's going to have impact for years and years and years. Don't need any individual. I have written many amicus where there are many judges who don't want to cite the amicus. That's fine. I don't care if my name's in there. But if it gets changed, wow, that's really a high.
Right. For sure.
Because you want it to be done right. And judges are just like many lawyers. They never took a course in administrative law, but they have to decide administrative cases, and they can really get mixed up because, as you said, the scope of review of administrative law is not the same as of the regular court system, and it can be very confusing to judges as to what really is the right answer.
Right. Well, one final question. Any words of wisdom for current or future law students based on your experience?
Well, I have an amicus right now where and I really shouldn't talk about it, so I won't, but some people are doing something wrong and no one wants to call them on that, even the judges. And I'm plowing ahead no matter what happens, because to me, integrity is everything. And I think what's happened here has really damaged the integrity of the judiciary. And that should not happen. And I think everybody in their legal career are going to have some difficult cases where, for whatever reason, the wrong thing can happen and no one will really notice, and you can go along, or you can stand up and say, it's just not right. It's just not right what's happening here. Rules of procedure work most of the time, but don't work all the time. You have to be able to stand up and say, we have to stop. We have to stop this because what's happening is just not right. And so that's my only advice, is that I do plan to keep my treatise going, which means that I have to keep up with all the case law. And I am going to continue to write amicus briefs in cases where I think the court needs some help. And then, believe it or not, that whole $1 billion controversy on the electrical stuff from the winter storm. Well, I'm working for Luminate at the present time, because believe it or not, I think it's going to be resolved administratively, not by the legislature or something else. And so I was hired for my knowledge of administrative law. So I don't think I'll have a lot of cases. They usually have to be something really big and complex related to it. But don't we all laugh about this? my wife and I wanted to travel more in the United States and in Europe and whatever. And we're just hoping like 2022, or will things get better? Will the variants bring us down again? Of making, because like right now, I talked to a lawyer in Austin who hasn't seen his daughter in 2 years, who's in New Zealand, and they are totally vaccinated. And I said, you can go now. And he wrote back, Americans are barred from coming to New Zealand. So that's what we want to do. And I haven't gotten beyond that yet. I'm in that really weird time when the new quarter started and I should have been teaching and I'm not teaching. And I have a bunch of friends from college, believe it or not, that we have kind of stuck together, and they're all retired. And they said the word, at least the first couple of years, is weird. You feel weird the whole time because you've been working your whole life and then you're not working. So I hope to stay involved in the law. Plus, you know what all these studies are showing now, keeping your mind active is potentially keeps away Alzheimer's, which, believe it or not, I have a family of 5 members that had Alzheimer's. And so I'm scared to death of getting Alzheimer's because it's such a horrible disease. It's almost more horrible for the ones who don't have the disease, because mom was, she had Alzheimer's for 12 years, and the last 8, she had no idea who she was. And so keeping the mind active.
And what you've described sounds better than working crossword puzzles. That's for sure. That's for sure.
I know. And, you always think you want to do other things for the community, and I just don't know what yet. And I can't tell you how many people have said, do not go out and get 3 or 4 community-based jobs immediately. They said, you'll burn yourself out, number one, and just take your time, give yourself a break, at least for a year, to kind of look around, see how other things work out. We have to see how the pandemic works out, all that. But it is strange. But the one thing that sticks in my mind, and I've heard a lot of people also have this too, is that when we were young, people who retired were getting ready to die. And it's just in your head, and you're going, I'm there now. Oh my goodness, I'm there now. So what do you do? One thing I hope I am feeling correctly at the end of my life is that, can I say a job well done? And I'm saying that, and one of the main bases is I have kept my integrity for my legal career. And to me, that's the most important thing. And I think that benefits our society all the way around.
That's what lawyers should be about. And you, my friend, are the embodiment of integrity and excellence. And I thank you, and we thank you for your many years of service and all of the lives that you've positively influenced, not only in terms of the great lawyers you've helped turn out, but for the fine people that you've helped to mold, and the kind way that you've helped students, because I've seen you do it through some times when they were having difficulties, and you've encouraged them. So thank you, and it's been a real pleasure to be your colleague.
Me also.
And your friend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.